All right. Are we live? It's trying to get there. Good evening. This is a further meeting of the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, February 21st. It's a little after 6:30. And this is a working meeting related to House Bill 814, which is the juvenile justice bill for this year. Committee, what I'm going to do, there have been discussions all over the place, I think, regarding this bill, both with me and with other members of the committee amongst yourselves. And I believe that there are broad changes to the bill that I'm going to just kind of walk through as we go forward. As I mentioned before, I asked members of the committee if they have amendments, and not for tonight. They'll be for tomorrow after bill hearings. If you have amendments, to please submit them to Lauren on the committee staff and or Hunter, and we can begin to put those together for tomorrow. And I'd ask them to be into the committee. I'm just going to set it at 12 o'clock if we can. We'll be a little forgiving if we need to be, but hopefully that'll give us enough time to make sure that there are copies and people can see those amendments. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to walk through and I'm going from the bill as it was introduced. And there are a number of amendments that I intend to offer tomorrow to the legislation. And I'm happy to have discussion as we go along. My goal tonight, he said, with hope, is that we will get to, we will not go later than 8 o'clock. We'll see if we can actually do that or not. So the first part of the bill starts on page 3. First substantive part of the bill is the juvenile juvenile jurisdiction and jurisdiction over children who are 10, 11, and 12 years old. In the bill, there are 5 categories of different crimes that are covered. What I am going to propose, and by the way, I'll take questions. I'm going to take them in chunks. I'll take questions as we go along here. So it reads, you all can read the bill as it's in your systems, and you probably have paper copies too. We'd change and make more specific the crimes in each one of these areas. For example, in B, I would offer an amendment tomorrow that would say that it's a crime involving weapons in sections 4203 and 204 of the criminal law article, which is basically the wearing and carrying of firearms. The C, or I should say of firearms. The C is a crime involving firearms and there's a more expansive definition under Title V of the public safety article. It would be limited to 5-133, 34, 36, 138, 139, 141, 142, 203, and 703. In committee, what that largely is those are the statutes that have to do with the possession of illegal guns, possession of ghost guns, possessions of guns that were procured in a straw purchase, and possession of sawed-off shotguns. As the committee heard in the testimony a couple weeks ago, the Humane Society identified 10607 as being the crime that they believe that should be covered in this area for 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, and it's basically the evisceration of animals. The sex offense in the 3rd degree is listed, and that would remain. What I also will propose in this part of the bill with regard to theft of a motor vehicle is an amendment that would not give immediate jurisdiction of the juvenile court over cases for 10 to 12-year-olds, with regard to theft of a motor vehicle. But it would require participation in a diversion program certified either by the Department of Juvenile Services or by a law enforcement organization for just that crime, for 7105, the theft of a motor vehicle. The reason for, first of all, for specifying the specific crimes, as I mentioned in the hearing, was to get more clarity into what specific statutes we would be looking at in this area. And then with what I'm proposing under the theft of a motor vehicle, the idea here is there have been a number of people who have expressed a concern that we should treat that we believe that theft of a motor vehicle is an important issue that we need to address, but that we believe that having immediate diversion and immediate attention in those cases is more important, and providing that immediate structure is more important in those cases. So we'd seek to do that, and if they failed out of the diversion program, then the juvenile court would have discretion. With that, I'm going to stop on this part and see if people have questions. Delegate Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you explain exactly how the requirement works? Because right now we're having problems with these diversion programs. If we can't charge the person, there's no sort of stick. So is it already laid out?
So to be clear, the only crime that I'm doing this diversion part for would be theft of a motor vehicle between 10 and 12. There are other diversion programs that exist for older kids, but for the purposes of this part of the bill, I'm focused there. The idea here is that there would be a stick at the back end,
okay.
But if they went through the diversion program and they were successful, then that's it.
Okay.
If they were not successful, then they would be referred to DJS, who would put them through the process, and they would go from there.
Great, thanks.
Delegate Pester.
For the diversion program, so I think you're saying that it will be mandatory.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so that'll be made clear, no more optional. And suppose that the diversion program, assuming we have more than one, that is selected for the student or the child, is not working, but it really is clear that it's not really about the child, that it's just not the right one. So before you send them off to the next step, that you try another one if it's clear that it's not the child, because all programs don't fit all children.
I could certainly take that. I think that's something we'd have to figure out how to craft that into statute, but the idea is that before it goes directly into DJS jurisdiction, that we seek to divert the child and move them in a different direction. And if the initial program doesn't work, try and figure out language that would then not completely, if the program's not working after 10 days, allow them to shift and to change into a different program.
But only if it's clear that the child is trying in it.
And that's where you get into the challenge of, trying to figure out whether a child is actually trying or not becomes, and that's part of the challenge with trying to craft this into a statute is, yes, the kids, we're trying to meet kids at really different places.
I'm not doing this. I don't want to do it. I don't like this and whatever.
Right. And so that's part.
That's enough.
That's part of that challenge. Delegate Taylor, and then I'm going to come around. Delegate Taylor.
I just don't know what ramifications, what does section 4-203 and 4-204 say about wearing and carrying of a firearm? That's all. I just want you to explain.
That's fine. Could I have the criminal law article, just
means.
because since we've got all these books, we might as well use them every once in a while. Top shelf.
Right there. We were just talking about
The first one, yeah, 1 through 7. Yeah.
when he goes.
Oh.
When he goes and gets the book of blank.
Oh, heck, I guess I could look it up. You know what? I could look it up.
We do use these books quite a while for those people at home, but wearing, carrying, and transporting a handgun is prohibited in basically in two different parts of the code. They're in two different parts of the code. So this is for wearing, carrying, and transporting a handgun as opposed to a firearm. It's a distinction where the public safety article deals with wearing and carrying a firearm, which is a different definition as opposed to a handgun, which is a very specific definition. And so that's why we include both the criminal law article and the public safety article in the bill. So 4203 is wearing and carrying of the handgun. 4204, and I just want to make sure that I have the words exactly right. It's the use of a handgun or an antique firearm in the commission of a crime.
Okay, in commission of a crime.
Yeah.
That's what's important. Okay.
Delegate Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question is specifically to the, for F, for the theft of a motor vehicle. And I want to craft this properly. So the diversion program, I don't know the length of diversion programs as a whole, but my question is, an individual successfully completes that, but as my colleagues point out with habitual offenders, if they successfully complete the program and then another incident, do they go back through that? How is that handled if we're repeated offenders? I guess is my question.
That's one of the questions that's come up, and that's one of the reasons why I'm setting this out in front of everybody here. One of the questions that has come up is if you have a child, especially a child between 10 and 12, and they come back up again and again, what are you going to do? So I think the involuntary, the diversion programs that DJS generally run around about 90 days, at least I think that's what they are in the statute off the top of my head. So the idea here would be that there would be a diversion program of 90 days. I guess the question is going to be out there of if this has happened again and again, should they get another chance to go through a diversion program? And I think that's a question certainly for the committee to take up. But this is my what I'm trying to respond to is that there has been some concern expressed on the committee that while people see that, and I believe a significant number see that crimes involving firearms, the evisceration of animals, or the sex offense of the third degree are in one category. Yes. Theft of a car is in a different category from that. And so the question is, should we treat that differently in some way? And how do you do that?
Thank you.
Delegate Conaway.
I mean, so in reference to F, so F would apply as long as B and C don't apply. So there are no weapons and no assaults, right?
If they had a weapon in the car, that they would be put under the juvenile jurisdiction. If they were under B, C, D, or E, those would put them under juvenile jurisdiction, regardless of whether it would, if any of those four, B, C, D, or E were alleged, then they would be put under juvenile jurisdiction if they were between 10 and 12.
Okay, so I've sent in a letter for the AG's opinion, but I'll ask you, suppose if there's a firearm in the car that belongs to the owner of the vehicle.
I mean, that's going to be a question of fact. That's going to be a question of fact for the police officer to determine whether or not they can make the charge in the first place. And that's going to be a question of fact. Yeah, that's going to be a question of fact for the police officer to determine whether or not they're going to actually charge there. And then it's going to go through, if this were to pass, it would go through the DJS process and then potentially could be sent to the state's attorney. And then they would decide whether there was enough there to go forward legally with the charge.
So it wouldn't automatically be deferred, I guess.
No, because there would be a crime involving a firearm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Delegate Kaufman.
Yes, and pardon my ignorance, but I think this is probably beneficial for people at home too. Are there, obviously the answer is yes, because you wouldn't have put it in. But are there diversion programs for kids that little? And also, like, I mean, I know you can't speak about any specific young people that you've met in your day job, but like, what do they focus on? Like, don't steal a car. I mean, like, can you talk a little bit about the diversion programs that are there geared towards young people and what they focus on. And also, just from my opinion, just as one delegate, I'm not in favor of I'm in favor of the change that you made, but I'm not in favor of Johnny gets diverted and then steals another car and gets to try again. Me personally, I think they should, the second time, I think they should go through what your original bill suggested. But if you could talk a little bit about the diversion programs for little kids, that'd be great, because I've only seen ROCA, which is for older kids.
Well, it's for, yeah, ROCA's for 16 and older, and the diversion and other programs for juveniles vary. I mean, they vary significantly depending on what you're looking at. Some use cognitive behavioral therapy, some use other therapies. Some, you know, the one of the things that I believe a lot of the literature that is out there is looking at culturally competent programming that seeks to meet kids where they are, and with trusted messengers who can give them greater guidance as to where, you know, what not to do, what to do. Are these programs out there? One of the things that I do know is in Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, and a couple other places, and some of the larger jurisdictions, they have diversion programs to start. And they came in and they were saying during after JJRA that those programs became harder for them to operate, because they needed not just the carrot but the stick at the back end. And so those do exist. The reason that we'd include language that says that it's a program that is certified by the Department of Juvenile Services or certified by law enforcement is it would give an opportunity for a local organization to say, we want to be part of this solution, and we want to go in and help provide diversion for kids. And so it provides a pathway to do that for those organizations.
Just very briefly, offline, if you can, I don't want to take more of the committee's time, but if you can send me some of the names of them. I just haven't, this is not I'm a Medicaid person in my day job, so I'd like to learn more about these programs and the kind of stuff they do and things like that.
Got it. Delegate Embry.
Yeah, I just, first as a clarification, this is a DJS run diversion, so they would decide whether or not it was being complied with, is that right?
DJS certified diversion, they wouldn't have to run it. They could certify a not-for-profit to run it.
But they would be it would be a diversion under their authority versus, so they would be, the assessment of whether or not it was completed, whether the kid was in compliance.
They would have to, that would be part of their process and they would have to establish a process then to certify it. The law enforcement diversion would be equally one where they would have to set that up themselves and determine how they would go forward with that.
This would be
For this piece,
yeah, DJS.
for this piece.
And the second piece, I know we've talked about this. I just, for kids this young, I worry about not having a parental component, parental accountability component, and I worry about a diversion that's just focused on the child.
I guess my question is, and this is a question that's come up a lot, is what does parental accountability look like, and what does accountability necessarily for the parent mean here? And look, I for people watching at home, I think that you hear parental accountability, it's a trigger for some people where they were like, yes, the parents should be accountable. They should be completely accountable. But what that looks like is much harder to figure out in a statutory context, and you can't hold a parent responsible for the crimes of a child.
No, I mean,
in every case.
And I know there's problems with the child in need of assistance and child in need of supervision, but that is what I envisioned possibly, where at least you have a court supervision and so the court can at least consider what the parents either support or what they should be doing, and they could be ordered to do. But anyway, I just flagged that issue if the diversion is only focused on the child.
No, I think that's right. I would also say there are going to be some parts we talk about later in the bill, and some further conversations that I think that we as a chamber, that we as a legislature need to have about the child needed services system. And it's not even right to call it a system, the process, I guess, more than anything. I think that there's a need to talk about that a little bit more. This legislation didn't get into that because I think it's we do a lot of challenging things. I think this is it's one of those super challenging things where we're trying to weigh keeping juveniles out of the system, while at the same time, the number of times I heard mandatory sins is epic. I've heard it over and over again. And I know that's something people are trying to figure out, and I suspect we're going to see some amendments tomorrow. But the question in my mind is it really a distinction without a difference between a mandatory sins and putting them under the jurisdiction of the department? And if it's sort of just semantic, then what are we actually doing? But that's a broader issue with this section of the bill.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I will.
you're good.
Draw-
That's okay. Delegate Tomlinson, then Grammer, and then I'm going to move on.
All right, thank you. And I'm kind of just trying to figure out as we go along, as a procedure, what's appropriate or not. So as we're going through this particular section, and I think Delegate Kaufman was kind of onto this. And if I'm misspeaking, please tell me, Delegate Kaufman. But I think you were talking about. Were you talking about if kids were to do the same crime a second time, should we be letting them out? Or
that was his broader point. Yeah. That if you had a child who was sent to the diversion program when they were 11, and then they're 12, and now they're stealing another car, or it's 3 weeks later and they're stealing another car, should they be able to take advantage of that diversion requirement more than once? And I'd be happy to hear from the committee about it, but I suspect that the people would not want them to be able to avail themselves of it more than once, but be open to hearing what people have to say about it.
I'm typing up amendments as we talk here.
Sure.
Should we propose them, or do you just want a formal amendment? Or is this kind of an opportunity to toss around an idea?
It's an opportunity to toss around some ideas, and I don't necessarily, I'm not going to make 8 o'clock hard and fast, but at the same time, yeah, this could go on for a while if we let it. And I'm aware that this is an important issue. So I do want to have that discussion, and yeah, we're going to do it out here in public because I think that's what's important. So if that is something, what I would say is, if you have something that would be an amendment to my amendment, then just, if you want to email me, email the chief of staff for the committee, send that to me, then that's fine. I'd be happy to take that. If you have an amendment that you want to make to the bill, once we're all said and done, that's independent of that, then you should just go to the amendment office and request an amendment to the bill as a whole and to make it to the bill. All right, Delegate Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question that kind of dovetails off Delegate Kaufman's comment. And I think his concern is more along the lines with my concern. The issues that we've seen in Eastern Baltimore County are less about the chronic issues we've seen in the last year, and more about the repeat offenders who just go on and on and on, and they're always out there and they're always back. So it's these issues of kind of repeat offenses, or a string of various offenses. And that's something we haven't, the various offense, the offender who offends with 4 or 5 or more different crimes, as opposed to, something we can try and capture perfectly. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that issue.
So with this part of the bill, the intent that is there is to look at these specific crimes. Again, if it's a felony, if it's a my brain is frying right now, so I apologize a little bit, but let me just make sure I'm getting most of my facts straight. If it's a crime of violence, then the case goes under juvenile jurisdiction if they're 10 through 12. So we're talking about basically cases that are serious misdemeanors, cases where they're in possession of a gun, and I've gone through them and listed them before. So if they're in that group, the sense is, all right, we need to pull these out of pull these out and say that these are also cases that we want to make sure are getting juvenile jurisdiction as well. Cases where there are kids who are committing multiple different crimes over time, you know, it has been an issue. It's an issue that's addressed in different ways later in the bill for kids who are 13 and above. At least the statistics from DJS have said that, or at least have appear to say that there are not as many of those who are 10 to 12 who are committing multiple different crimes. It's not to say there are none. So the focus here is on those more serious misdemeanors, and that's why they're here and why we're not addressing, at least among 10 to 12-year-olds, that the frequent flyer side. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. You get Delegate Crutchfield.
Just wanted to make a comment to the diversionary programs and the multiple offenses. So, I mean, also the other thing I thought with this was that, you know, listen, we're trying to really address a situation that we know is going on. And we want to make sure that, you know, these diversionary programs are going to be the right programs, right? And so with that said, hopefully we won't have, you know, the repeat offenses, but also recognizing that this is all going to be brand new types of programs, because these are programs that are not currently in use or been developed, really. I mean, we've got Thrive, we've got some other things that are going on, but especially for the younger kids, that we want to make sure that are, you know, going to be just programs that will definitely get to the heart of what's happening. Because the other part is that even a kid may be, you know, 11 or 12 and they do an auto theft and they then repeat it 8 months later, then we need to go back in, I think, and find out what else is going on. You know, why are they continuing to do this? So I think that's part of just recognizing, you know, diversionary programs are hopefully going to help. They're going to be different. We haven't used these kind before, so hopefully we will be able to address the situation.
Yeah, briefly, go ahead.
And I'll remind you, in Baltimore County, you know, we had joins for these particular age group, you know, 10 to 12.
Which I think would qualify under this.
For certain crimes.
Yeah.
But not the chronic crimes. And as we know, Schiraldi's, we've seen the data for Baltimore County, and juvenile crime is up 100%. And some of it is property crime. So, you know, what I don't want to do is walk away. We lost joins. Baltimore County was our diversion. And under this section, maybe it's elsewhere in the bill, but we haven't gotten any solution back. And that's my concern.
So I'm going to continue to move on, because we're going to, we will get to some solutions here, I think, as we go along. On page, so much fun when they're stapled. Page 6. This is a small change, but it was left out of the initial draft of the bill. It adds 5203 of the public safety article, which is the possession of a sawed-off shotgun, to charges where which would be sent directly to the state's attorney. So that adds that to other statutes that are, again, statutes that have to do with the illegal possession of handguns and firearms and ghost guns. I'm going to keep moving. One of the amendments that I'm going to offer on page 7, 17 through 20 would strike language related to Senator Carter's bill, SB 2, would strike those lines that have to do with crimes involving children under 13 that result in the death of the victim, and that's at the family's request, and I respect that. So we're going to take that out there. That's on page 7. And it's in another part of the bill too, and I'll get to that in a second. On page 8, I'll tell the committee that this is new language that we're trying to figure out exactly what it's going to look like. But another issue that has come up from the Office of the Public Defender, also from the State's Attorneys Association, and from the chiefs and sheriffs, all has to do with language that was included in the bill that would require a police officer to write a written report or citation a written complaint or citation and turn it over to the Department of Juvenile Services. Under the bill, it says that it would be turned over to DJS for processing under the specific statute. Several of those groups pointed out, well, we don't necessarily want DJS to be reviewing every single one of these cases. The point here was to get that information so that it was in one place and so that DJS had information about previous complaints. And so that they had it even if nothing happened with those complaints. And so I have had some conversations today with the department and the Office of the Public Defender and the state's attorney. I don't have specific language now for you right this second, but the idea would be that it would require a police officer as part of the report in some way to indicate whether they wanted a petition to be filed with the department, and if not, whether they diverted the child to a diversion program or took no further action. Again, we'll have more specific language on that when we are closer to time tomorrow. If other people are drafting amendments to that point, that's fine. I'll take them. And I'm happy to see other language with that. But at the moment, I think we're going to be able to figure out something that somehow addresses the concerns of everybody involved. And I'll take a breath. And Delegate Erican,
Thank you, sir. So you're anticipating that the police officer would make this decision? Is that the final decision maker?
No, the
Okay.
decision maker as to what happens within the juvenile system would still be the Department of Juvenile Services. The idea here is that one of the things that I heard consistently, both from the department and from others, was that you have these crimes that happen and you have arrests that are being made, but then the police officer is taking them home. And to Delegate Grammer's point, and then they're done. They're not writing a report. Nobody knows what happened next. Nobody knows if they were sent to diversion. Nobody knows if they were sent to a local care team. Nobody knows anything. It just poof into the ether. And because of that, we have a harder time when people report crimes and then they don't see anything happening. We have that side of the problem, but we also have a sort of a larger data collection issue where it makes it difficult to determine when if a tree falls in the forest, it's, and nobody's there to hear it kind of problem. So that was the goal with the language. And it was one of those things that I thought, this makes perfect sense. So of course, everybody has a problem with it. It's fantastic. So, and it's fine. And all of the concerns are real. And so we're going to try and stick the landing somehow with that. Delegate Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, what you're proposing, I know you're kind of still working on the language.
Yeah.
What I had been hearing from people, it was that this language was going to hurt and prevent juveniles getting juveniles into some diversion programs. So with what you're working on, will that?
I don't know that this would stand in the way of kids getting into diversion programs. The desire here is for those reports to go to DJS so that if things happen in the future, they have information about previous arrests that didn't result in any further action, that it didn't result in any further DJS action, so it can inform their actions later on. They weren't getting information in some cases for juveniles that were going into diversion. In some cases, they were going into diversion, coming out the other side. But then if they came back for a later crime, the DJS was having a hard time figuring out what happened or even knowing whether that happened in the first place. So again, it provides a greater data stream. This is meant to provide data, but it's also not meant to have every single arrest result in a DJS complaint that would both not just overburden the agency. It would be that is part of the reason for the fiscal note is they were concerned that they would need a lot more intake officers just to review complaints. That was not the goal of this. The other bigger challenge is how, and so that was also a concern of the Office of the Public Defender, concern of the state's attorneys is, well, but if they go into a diversion program and pop out the other side, and they don't successfully complete that diversion program, what happens next? And are they still able to go forward with things? I think that we're going to be able to get to the data collection part and balance all of that out. But right now I don't have specific language. And there you go. That's what's going on with that piece of it. Delegate Simpson and Tolles.
And my understanding somewhat of the record keeping also has to do with let's say my kid is acting out and we have this issue and they've committed some of these crimes, and now I send them to go live with dad, who happens to be another jurisdiction. So the goal would be that the system, the juvenile services, would have knowledge of that and be able to properly make decisions. Correct.
As a statewide organization.
As a statewide, as opposed to, Worcester County is doing one thing, Carroll's doing another, and these kids are shifting around. And then we see in the news saying this kid committed the same crime in various different spots.
That's right.
And the school was unaware. That was my understanding of that whole report.
That is the reason, part of the reason for the reporting. Delegate Tolles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you answered my question. I know when we spoke, I do like this part of the bill. And so I think we talked about some type of citation where they would check, yes,
Yes, no, divert or something along those lines.
Yes, no, maybe, right. That's something along those lines. Have you had an opportunity to kind of talk through that with law enforcement and get their take? I think you said you did, but
I've talked to state's attorneys. I've talked to the public defenders. I hope to talk to the chiefs and sheriffs after I see if I can get somewhere in between the chiefs, the office of the public defender and the state's attorneys. Pray for me.
I will definitely pray for you. Try to work that out. But I know the lead of one of the leaders of the I don't know if it matters, but the state's attorneys, not state's attorneys, the Maryland State Police Union or whatever they're called.
The FOP.
The FOP, the state. One of their leaders is Prince George's law enforcement officer. I'd be more than happy. I'll take your lead to get their opinion. Sure. Because I do like that part. Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to move on. Is that okay?
It's not really questions.
I'll keep moving. The next question, next area of the bill has to do with pre-trial detention, pre-hearing detention. Right now, the law says that a child, we're on page 9 going into 10, starting at line 30. The law says that if a child is alleged to have committed a delinquent act, they cannot be placed in detention before a hearing. So this is pre-hearing, the equivalent on the adult side pre-trial. If the most serious offense would be a misdemeanor if committed by an adult, unless, and this is current law, the law involved the act involved a handgun and would be a violation under the statutes that I've listed earlier within the criminal law article, or the child had been adjudicated delinquent at least twice in the last 12 months. The bill said that first part stays the same with regard to a handgun offense. The second part under the bill would eliminate 12 months and would say that they could be held in pre-trial, the pre-hearing detention if they were adjudicated delinquent twice ever. And the bill said the other way that they could potentially be held prior to a hearing would be as if the child was under supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services when the act occurred, and the alleged act, if committed by an adult, would be subject to a penalty of imprisonment of more than 90 days. Again, discussions that I've had, and I've had with the departments and with the Office of Public Defender and the state's attorneys and others, everybody's kind of, it's a little bit of a Goldilocks issue. It's hot, too warm, too cold. And so the thought would be, and that what my amendment would be to say they would be eligible for pretrial detention if they have 2 adjudicated delinquencies in the last 2 years. Again, the delinquency in the adult system is a guilty. And then changing the saying that if the child was under supervision when the alleged act occurred, that if the alleged act carried a penalty of at least 2 years as opposed to the 90 days, they would be eligible for detention. Now, to go to the larger process, DJS makes a recommendation as to whether or not the child should be detained prior to trial, and they use a tool called alternatingly the DRE or the DRAI, depending on which day of the week I talk to somebody about it. But it's DRAI. It's available to be looked at online. The point system that they use to determine whether somebody should be held or not is available for people on the Department of Juvenile Services website. What we are doing here is we're expanding the universe of people that could be put into detention, but they still would need or detention pretrial, but they still would go through that process at the department to determine whether or not they would be held or not. By extending the time frame where kids are held or found delinquent to 2 years, the idea is it obviously would expand the window. It is not completely unusual if they have been found delinquent twice in a year. There would be more people if it were under 2 years. But the idea here is, again, going to an issue where kids are coming back again, that indicates some issue that needs to be addressed. And then again, if they were under probation or under supervision, I should say, of the department when the act occurred, the goal was not to hold them for stealing a Snickers bar or for a lower level offense. It was to look at events that are more serious misdemeanors, like the unauthorized use of a car, like car theft, and crimes that carry higher penalties. Thus, the amendment I'm going to put forward would make both of those changes. And with this, I will stop and I'll go to Delegate Simpson and take other questions.
And we back up a little bit to the page 9. One of the suggestions that I gave to you was suggesting under, and I believe it's like line 16 in that basically 2:1 through 3 is that can we have a child who commits these acts? Because as we said, violent, there's sex abuse. So this is where we have the child trafficking and all of that. Can we add something in there that they must be evaluated by Child Protective Services and Child Advocacy Center?
This is one of the things that we've been discussing, and we've discussed since you and I have talked. So we don't have that language ready. Not putting all this language out right now, but that is in the hopper. It just hasn't been finished yet. So we'll get to that.
Looking at these kids that are pretty young and.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Good.
No, this is not the 10 and 12-year-old section, but the part that Delegate Simpson is bringing in a completely separate issue. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow because that was an amendment that you were looking for. So I wanted to keep that separate from the ones, not to say that we wouldn't support it or not. Okay, don't look at me that way. But I'm just saying that we don't have that done yet. So it don't have it properly drafted at all. And I wanted to give Lauren a chance to sleep.
Just jump over it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Delegate Williams.
I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone. So we're creating, I guess, sort of 2 buckets where the child will not be placed in, 2 buckets where the child will be placed in detention.
Could be placed.
Could be placed. So it's a could.
It's a could, but it's dependent on, it would be dependent on the actions of the department in this case, because it is a pre-trial detention. So there are three buckets. There's three. If they're committing a crime with a handgun, and it's a misdemeanor. So again, if it's a felony, that's different. Felonies are different because those are eligible for,
Then I
right.
just want to make sure that we change the may to a could on line 31, because right now it says may. If I'm looking at this correctly.
No,
Okay.
so we don't want to change the may to a could, because that the point is in that line of the law, that's existing law, that the child alleged to have committed a delinquent act may not be placed in detention.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you don't want to change, you don't want to do that.
So then the first bucket is the handguns, if committed by an adult.
Right,
Would
and
be
then
a
the second is if they've been found delinquent
with twice in
twice
2
in the last
years.
2 years. And then if they were on probation, or if they were on probation and the new act carried at least 2 years if they were charged as an adult.
Okay. So then do we need to put the other or back in then?
Which other or?
The one on line 35, page 9.
We will look at that and I'll
Okay.
talk to, and we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's my question.
Yeah. I'm gonna move on. There was language that was proposed by the department that says that basically if a police officer proposed that the child be, I'm now on page 10, but this is a part of the bill that's being added that's not going to be in the existing part of the bill. So let me just talk about it conceptually and then you'll see language tomorrow. But what the language is, the language that's being proposed says that if a police officer recommends that a child be detained, but the DJS intake officer determines, or the DJS officer, if it's determined that the child shouldn't be detained, then the intake officer has to make an inquiry within 2 business days as to whether the court has jurisdiction over the child and whether judicial action is in the best interest of the child. What this means effectively is that DJS would have to move faster to determine whether or not they believe the child should have their case resolved at intake, go through the diversion tube, or have their case sent to the state's attorney. The reason that I believe it would be better to move these cases faster is I argue it's better for the kid in that we're moving these cases forward. There's a little bit more finality about it. We can get to the end of the story a little bit faster. They can get closer to services faster, and they can get closer to services faster. It provides help for, frankly, I mean, not to put words in the public defender's mouth, but it's clarity for their client. It's also clarity for the state as to what happens next. And so that's why I'm including that as one of the amendments. 2 business days. So it could be 4 actual days, but it's 2 business days. Delegate Taylor.
Was actually my question, but you 2 business days. Where's the child at this point? During the 48 hours, where is this?
So the
It's not
child
48
would have been released by the DJS intake officer. They would have been released, they would have been sent to their home, to their guardian. And then they would make the choice right within those 2 business days, whether or not they wanted to proceed and send it to the state's attorney, do the diversion or resolve it at intake. If they resolve it at intake by moving it faster, DJS is under a requirement then to inform the agency that charged the child that says, hey, we're deciding not to go forward. And then they have the right to appeal that under current law to the state's attorney's office. And they can say, wait a minute, we thought they should have been detained. They decided to take a different action, and they can ask for somebody else to take a look at the case. And the representative from DJS is actually nodding her head up and down and. Okay. Delegate Kaufman.
Yes, Mr. Chair, you just indicated this evening that this would cause an acceleration, that DJS would have to make their decision faster. And I agree with you that that's a good thing, because rather than having a kid in limbo, they know what's going to happen to them pretty quickly. But has Secretary Schiraldi or his designee indicated how many more pins they would need as a result? Because I imagine to make decisions faster, they'll need more bodies.
This was brought to me by the Department of Juvenile Services, and it's my impression that they don't need anybody extra to do this.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to keep going. On where am I? All right, at the bottom of page 10. Lines 26 and 27. One of the bigger conversations that people have had in and out of the committee has been surrounded the issue of a technical violation of probation. And the bill as drafted said that 2 or more unexcused failures to appear at a treatment program ordered by a court would not be a technical violation. One of my amendments would strike that language from the technical violation section. The concern, the reason for that language was we want to make sure that kids are actually going to these programs. And so to that end, we are going to add language to the bill around on page 11, probably somewhere in between lines 8 and 9. So line 8.5. And we're crafting this now. Oh, I'm sorry. I do, but I've been kind of going back. So it's going to be in the section with regard to a technical violation, but we're working. The goal here is going to be to say that good cause under the law, the court can extend probation up to a maximum amount of time. And what we're going to add to the bill is say that good cause, if someone fails or has 2 or more unexcused absences from programs that they're ordered to attend as a condition of probation, that would be good cause to extend the probation. It would not be a reason that it would not be a technical, it would still be a technical violation, but it would give the court the opportunity to extend the probation. The goal again was to make sure that there was enough time for people to complete the programming and to make sure that they actually were participating in the programming that needed to be completed. So to that end, we would move that into the good cause section. I believe that others would like that 2 to look more like a 3 or a 4, and that's something we could talk about tomorrow. The other challenge in this part of the bill was, as I discussed during the bill hearing, is defining an unexcused absence is challenging, in the sense that kids will have challenges in some cases getting to programming. Parents may have difficulty getting kids to programming. There could be challenges of in any number of ways. So by moving it effectively, making it clear in the ability to request a postponement, or I'm sorry, an extension of the probation, it allows the court to say, all right, we're going to look at what's going on here. And if they haven't done what they need to do, that is in and of itself a good enough reason for us to extend the probation. I'll stop here. Delegate Kramer.
Thank you. Briefly, as it's currently drafted, if it were 2 or more unexcused failures was a technical violation, what was the consequence?
I mean, it would be treated as an actual violation of the juvenile probation, and it could result in everything from it would be up to the court as to whether or not it could be community detention, could be none of that. It would depend on what the court would say would be the right answer to that question. I think what is more important, and the other part that I think was important that came from the bill hearings was, especially when we're dealing with issues related to mental health, you want to make sure that you are giving kids the time, but also in some cases you have to allow for some of those unexcused absences, but the challenge has been trying to figure out, okay, how many unexcused absences is okay? And is there a line between that and absconding, meaning you're not doing anything altogether? And so I believe this is a reasonable compromise that says we're going to make sure they're going to stay on probation until they complete that.
Duration for the extension of probation.
So we'll get to that right now. So under the bill, as it was drafted, there will be an amendment here, some amendments here, but under the bill as drafted, it would extend the length of time that people could initially be put on probation for a misdemeanor. It would raise that from 6 months to a year. That remains the same. It would extend the length of the maximum time that somebody could be on probation for a misdemeanor from 1 to 2 years. One of the changes that will be made is on the felony side. It will raise the amount of initial potential time on probation from 1 year to 2 years. And then the maximum amount of time that they could be on probation would not go as long as 4 years. It would go to a maximum of 3 years. In the bill, it set regular hearings to review probation at 4 months. It removes that and sends it back to what it was before, it having it reviewed at 3 months. So it's a way of making sure that, again, that kids are participating in it, but also if kids are participating, they're doing well, the court could look at it and say, okay, we're done. If they're not doing well, it provides that additional coverage. Looking around. Okay. On page 12, we are removing another part of the bill related to Senate Bill 2, which is Senator Carter's bill. On or about page 13, we are going to add language that requires the Department of Juvenile Services they're already required to develop a 3-year plan. We would add to the plan that they would have to include programs developed for youth at the highest risk of becoming a victim or perpetrator of gun violence. The administration and the secretary has set up a program called Thrive that seeks to do just this. So this is effectively codifying the Thrive program and connecting services to those children who are in that category. This also, I would tie it back to the interests that at least that I, the chair, have with the 10 to 12 category, and not necessarily to go back into that too much. But again, one of my focuses on the gun crimes is, if we're going to have this new program, that again is the kind of programming that we need. And I'll say in my experience across the street, one of the questions that there are a couple magistrates who ask questions every time: what programs does the Department of Juvenile Services have for kids who are found in possession of guns? And the answer for years has been nothing. And so I will compliment the secretary. It was one of the first meetings that we had back in February last year. I brought that up to him. And so he's at least I don't want to minimize it. He has started this program and begun to roll it out statewide. And I think it is a step in the right direction. Delegate Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you just tell us a little bit about what Thrive is, and is it what's the efficacy? Do we have any data on its effectiveness?
It's new, and so it's difficult to go to the data. I think one of the last conversations I had with the secretary about it was, I think they had about 35, and I am looking to the person from the department here. About 35 kids were initially in it, now 40, or that could be 4 from my perspective, by the way, because you need to put your hands around. About 40 kids participating. And again, the idea is it is a program that seeks to be, that seeks to deal with a smaller group of kids, a targeted group of kids, and address the issues that they have, the very specific issues that they have that brought them into possession of a firearm, that could bring them into a possession of a firearm, particularly if they were, if they, you know, they had their best friend shot, things like that. Delegate Eric.
Are there parents involved? Is this like any type of family?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the whole unit. Great.
Yes, the idea it's the whole unit. Delegate Tolles and Pasteur.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I just wanted to confirm, would that be a new, where would that, adding the Thrive program on page 13? It will be like, it will be under, because it says, I'm looking at.
So under the bill, it won't be in the bill as it's drafted right now, but it'll be Roman IX. Yeah, it'll be another, actually, that whole section, yeah, will be added in 9204 of the Human Services article. So it's, yeah.
Versus article. Okay, so it'll just be like where it says 9101, it'll be.
Yeah,
IX
it'll,
something.
it's 9204 and it's gonna, it will include those programs as part of the larger plan that they have to do every 3 years.
Thank you.
Delegate Pasteur.
This goes to Delegate Toll's question and some of the points that were made earlier. So one of the things that I put in as or looking at the amendment has to do with pages we haven't even gotten to it, and that's on the commission.
We're getting there.
Okay, because under that section, though, as we look at it, part of it is to take a look at services, and it outlines special programs, projects, blah, 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 blah. So that's why, in terms of Delegate Toll's question, Thrive is not, and some other things are not laid out here, as well as diversionary pieces, because they actually come under what the commission should do. So in my head, I think, and in conversations with other people, a lot of other people, the whole notion, if not pieces of it, or all of it, about that commission needs to come before that very end. Because the way it's situated now, the whole thing, no one gets to that because you get stuck on what the penalties are, et cetera, and don't see, as our questions have indicated, that they do fit in, and it's not as murky as it appears to be, because that commission.
One moment, please.
I
I'm
will.
going to so this is an issue that's popped up in the background a couple times. And it goes to whether or not we can change the order of things in the bill after the bill is drafted. And that is very difficult to do, because once it's drafted, we're kind of operating off of that. And there are DLS rules as to what comes first, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, but look, if you can change that preamble. If you change that, I mean, it's the same words. It's just reorganizing some of the sentences. So the sentences let you know from the beginning that there is this bigger thing. It's that commission thing that is going to infuse and clean up all of the other things. It's still the same wording. You haven't really changed the bill, but you've changed your opening. You just switched those words around. So you haven't changed the product.
One of the things that we can do is we can change the order of the purpose paragraph,
Exactly.
but everything else in the bill is alphabetical based on the article of the annotated code that you're dealing with. So
Yeah.
I can't move the annotated code around. We could try and
No,
rearrange the
but
alphabet.
what you just said is what I said. You just used real words. I'm a school teacher, not an attorney. So I went where I know. So, but you just said the same thing, preamble, whatever. You called it the whatever.
Yeah, I know,
Okay,
lawyers.
so that's fine.
A bunch
That's
of
all I'm
lawyers, it's
saying, is
terrible.
just change those words around and it'll be clearer.
The vice chair, then Delegate Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I asked this like as well, Delegate Pasteur, but keep in mind that when this is all said and done, if I want to know about the commission on juvenile justice reform, I'm gonna go to that section, right? If I'm gonna Google it, I'm gonna go to that section. So I get what you're saying. I was asking the same thing because I noticed that people weren't getting to the towards the end of the bill, but this is not, the bill is the bill, but eventually it's gonna go into the codes. And when someone's looking for it, they're not gonna even know about this whole process of this unless they do a legislative history, which a lot of people don't do. So my point is that I agree with you. I would have liked for it to be at the front end, but because of the drafting requirements.
And
Yeah.
that's fine, I don't have a problem with that, but right now, this is for all of us who have to vote on it. And that's where my head is now. How do we articulate it for each other so that we put out a product that when it goes in the book or wherever it goes, we're all saying the same thing and we have the same answers for those people who are not gonna look at this.
Gotcha. Mhm.
Delegate Taylor, please.
My question has to do with timing. So I understand DJS has created this program called Thrive. And there are other programs out there that could be age appropriate and effective diversionary programs. Do we have a commitment from DJS that these programs will be set up equally around the state prior to this bill taking into effect? And if it's not, then we're going to find ourselves almost in the exact same predicament that we're in right now.
So I'll go to one of the last amendments I'm going to offer tomorrow, and that is to make an earlier effective date for the bill. And we make the earlier, okay, Delegate Pasteur is having a party. We were creating an earlier effective date to July 1st for the entire bill. To your point, the challenge with that and doing that with Thrive is that it is a deliberate, the goal here. Many members of the committee went and saw Roca in Baltimore, and they are very deliberate about how they grow, when they grow, how they expand, and they try not to grow quickly. The goal with Thrive, I think, as well, is going to be to move very deliberately, very slowly, and to move from county and jurisdiction to jurisdiction, building relationships with partners across the state. I'm putting some words in the set, but the representative from DJS is nodding her head. So that is the goal here, is that those services need to get built out. Will they be available on July 1st? I don't think that they can be. I know that the program is just now getting started, and it's going to take time in different parts of the state. Having said that, you know, the challenge that the department has with regard to providing services is in the background of all of this. And regardless of what we do in this bill, there's more resources for Thrive. There's more resources in other bills that are being considered by the Appropriations Committee that I'm going to be able to talk a little bit more about, I hope, tomorrow. But there's resources in the blueprint. All of these things are there, and the challenge is breaking through the silos with different parts of state government, different parts of local government. And to that end, we're going to get here in a minute to the commission and get to the place where we're hoping to bring people to the table to be able to break down some of those silos to help facilitate the growth of some of those services and to be able to do it quickly. One of the challenges we have, period, in dealing with this issue is that these issues, these problems don't solve quickly, and the services to help them don't just happen overnight. And magically we stop all car theft. Magically we stop all gun crime. It takes time, and it takes actual relationship building, and that is what we hopefully will get. Going to give the secretary the opportunity to have that time. If you have a follow-up, go ahead.
I do. So could we propose that we delay implementation of the bill's effective date, until we have a comfort level that we're able to provide the services that we need for our kids, at least at some, basic level. Maybe the partnerships could be created prior to Thrive Create, so, because otherwise we are essentially, to me, putting the cart before the horse.
I think that what we are doing with the broader legislation is putting guardrails around the legislation that was passed previously. I think that, and as part of those discussions and consistently the question has been getting kids into some of the services at the back end. There are,
have more.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that some of the challenges that the department clearly has been in getting kids into the services, but it's also been in the follow-up. And it's also been in making sure that we're following up with the kids afterwards too. And that's, quite frankly, and with no disrespect to the administration or to the department, that is going to be one of the challenges that the administration and the department has to deal with going forward after April 9th, when we leave town. This is the dare to be great moment for the secretary and for the second floor. With no disrespect to anybody, this is it. It's going to be, here's what we expect. Let's take the next forward.
Same thing in the JJRA. This is what we expect, right? And
I look, as one of the sponsors of the JJRA, that's right. And that is one of my deepest frustrations about the entire process. And for those people who have watched the rest of my hair starting to fall out about this, that has been my greatest frustration about this. Again, I still think one of the things I said before holds, that I accept that there are going to be challenges with this going forward. I believe there need to be, I think that the last couple of years have shown that we need to have some guardrails around the system. We can do that. We can give people a sense of, okay, here's the structure for DJS. We're not going to be able to make it completely transparent. That can't be the goal because we're dealing with kids. But we're going to build this out to give people some level of confidence that in more serious cases and in cases where kids are coming back to the system, that there's somebody looking at what's going on. I would like to get to the commission, but Delegate Pasteur and then Simpson.
Well, I'm just going to say that I believe that Delegate Taylor is a mind reader, because the thing that I wrote goes to just what she said, but you can't start it all at the same time. So I'm just a school teacher. So I'm asking, could the commission, because when this is passed, the secretary will know that commission has to happen, and those people, they have to do and start finding those programs. And actually, we talked about this. I talked to the secretary right after, I think Kara was, well, it was during interim, right? So we already talked about that. So my question is, can the commission start so that all of the gathering of the programs and the projects and all of the things that will make this go have a starting date of July 1? And because in this body, in this document, it says October 1st.
That's when
for it.
Right.
And then that gives the commission months before this October date pops up. And that gives them an opportunity to find projects and all of the things that it says the commission is supposed to be about. So that when we actually, this really goes into effect, we have that overarching body that is ready to do its bigger job and has already started the other job of pulling it together. It will pull in what Delegate Grammer has said. Simpson has said just about the different programs, about the ones in Baltimore County. They will have the time to do that. Can you have two different
So one of the amendments I'm going to offer on, is going to be, I don't want you to switch to page 23 because I want to talk about some of the things in between here and there. But we made the whole bill effective on July 1st. I don't have a problem making the commission start on July 1st and having the rest of the bill on October 1st. If that's what you're proposing, because then that way we would
Yeah.
address that issue. It means that Lauren is
Yes.
going to probably have to stay up for at least another half an hour. It doesn't mean that at all. We can figure that out, and I don't have a problem proposing. I don't have a problem proposing that at all. So we can make that happen.
I'm drafting her amendment, it's coming your way.
Huh?
She's already drafted it. I'm sending it your way.
That's fine. We can figure out how to
Thank you.
do
Thank
that on
you.
our end too.
Thank
Delegate Simpson, then Grammer, then I'm going to move on.
So we've talked about that there is a bunch of money that is also related to
Right.
developing programs. And then we do know there was $111 million put into the consortium. And I know in Frederick, many of those programs are actually at-risk kids or kids who've done some of these things. So we
Correct.
do have some stuff. And as you said, we don't have to, the whole bill can be in effect July 1st, but have pieces of it if
Well,
we see.
And just to
Needing
clarify,
time.
yeah, but just to clarify, the leader of the commission is not the Department of Juvenile Services. It's the government. What are we calling GoCap? We're calling it GoCap again? We're calling it GoCap again. It's GoCap. So it means that they would get to they would get to do it. And I have no problem, the governor's representatives here too, I mean, of making a request. I would not be shocked if the governor's office did not start working prior to July 1st to begin some of the work that would need to get done to get the commission up and running. But we'll make, I'll say that I'm going to make a change to my amendment to allow for the commission on January 1st and the effective date of the bill on October 1st. Yeah, oh my God, July 1st and October 1st. Grammar.
Okay, I just want to clarify. We're talking about the Commission on Juvenile Justice Reform and Emerging Best Practices, right?
Yes.
So this, actually in my bill, I had language very similar to this. I took it out because you were addressing it, and I think it's very prudent. I was on the fatality review team who did a lot of similar kind of exploration of these issues, and I think it's frankly one of the best parts of the bill. I don't know why we would give up a quarter of the year of the work and analysis that we could do looking at picking through the problems and the changes in the system. You know, we've talked about SINs a little bit. I don't even think, there's a great grasp of how SINs works. And I don't know why we would delay our action, the back end investigation of the entirety of the system when we're only reporting every 6 months. So if we put the work group together in July, the law doesn't go into effect until October, and we're only reporting every 6 months, we're not even going to have information to provide the General Assembly by next year's session. So respectfully, I think this is one of the best parts of the bill where we don't have to get into, the punitive measures. But I really have a problem with hamstringing our ability to work with stakeholders and kind of start to explore what's going on here.
So you're proposing a date prior to July 1st?
No, I think the whole thing should go into effect at the same time.
So
July 1st.
Okay, so just to review, the moment about 15 minutes ago when Delegate Pasteur became very excited was when I said that the whole bill was going to come into force on July 1st. But now, okay, but then you wanted to have the commission on July 1st and the bill on October 1st.
I understand what y'all said. I was excited because you were talking about July 1, and I had in my head about the commission
Yes.
for July 1. That's why I was excited. But I understand what Delegate Grammer is saying. I mean, people want to see what the action is now. I mean, immediately.
Yeah.
Is that
Why don't
correct?
we'll have some more discussions about this. If we're quibbling about the effective date, I'm going to.
I
begin
just
to
think that
slowly
we should
whimper.
give them, have something that has.
That means everything else is great, probably. Delegate Williams? Okay, great.
So I hear what you're saying, but here's the hiccup. And this goes back to, I think, what Delegate Taylor was saying, is that one, we're not certain if all of the programs are up and running, ready to go immediately, especially when we're talking about this section as it relates to the 10 and 12-year-olds. That doesn't exist at all on a statewide level. It exists in some jurisdictions in smaller levels, but it doesn't exist on a statewide level. And so I feel like this goes back to what Delegate Pastor was saying about getting the commission going early, getting DJS time to set up whatever new programs need to be set up. We're talking about Thrive, which is brand new. We're talking about other stuff, which is brand new, that still has to get all worked out and figured out. And I think that's the hiccup. But I understand your point. You want to be able to say, when we come back here in January, this is what has happened.
State and local government here, you're going to give up the most active time that juvenile crime occurs in the summer months. I think.
But we have a system in place now. Is it perfect? No, but we do have a system in place. We have SINs in place already. And I agree with you that I think the problem is that people don't know how it works, which is why they don't use it, which is why we have no data about it, because it's an amorphous idea to the people who should be using it the most.
I get that, but if you delay implementation with reporting every 6 months, which is the way the bill is currently
So
drafted.
do you think we should report every
well,
3 months?
I do. And I think we should have something that we've all talked about before next session. But I'd be happy to talk more about this tomorrow.
Would reporting every 3 months pose a problem?
Okay. We'll have further conversations with it's not really the department's issue. It'll end up being the administration's issue. Let me have a little more conversations with them over this evening. And for the love of God, let's go on to this part of the bill. Delegate Tolles, I apologize, but I want to keep going here just for a second. On page, thank you. I'm sorry, Delegate Tolles. On page 18, line 18 through 19, we strike the State Department of Education from the bill and we put in the superintendents. I will tell you, it's going to be my intention also in this part to add principals, not because Delegate Pasteur was at one point an assistant principal. You were a principal too. I demoted you. Okay. But the idea is, with no disrespect to the State Department of Education, we want to get closer to the ground, and we can find that out with superintendents and principals and less with the State Department. We're going to remove a department of the Maryland State Police. We're going to remove the state police and replace that with a seat for the chiefs, and then the others on the commission. And then the other seat that is the chiefs and sheriff's seat would be the sheriff's seat. The idea being police chiefs tend to be the urban jurisdictions, and the sheriffs tend to be the rural jurisdictions. So we're covering both of those there. There was a request for a seat on the table that we're going to need to add for a representative from an organization that provides services, a not-for-profit organization that provides services to juveniles. That is something in the last 30 minutes. So that is something that I'll be bringing forward tomorrow. On page 19, we add language. There were two employees of the Department of Juvenile Services. We changed that to say 2 employees of the Department of Juvenile Services with different job titles recommended by the president of AFSCME Council 3. That's there. They are represented by AFSCME, and so they would like to be part of this. There is in the what they're going to be reviewing and reporting on area, we add language to the bill after line 29 on page 20. So that the commission shall review and report on the use of child in need of supervisions petitions or SINs petitions. The wait time for placement of children in facilities will also be there. There have been some requests also to talk about the kind of programming that's available. We just need to, we're trying to figure out how to draft that at the moment. And the goal will be to also add, I think it's already in there in parts, but seek to map out the services that are available to juveniles across the state and seek to identify gaps for those services and give that as another responsibility of the commission. You all can read the other items that are there for the commission. I'm sure if you've got amendments for those, just bring them in. We'll take a look at those. But that would be the sum and substance of amendments from the chair that I am going to offer tomorrow. I know that Delegate Simpson has a question. I'm going to take that and then I'm going to do next steps.
Yeah, back before, some of the activity, the report, and this goes also for some of the things that they're, in the next section is looking at the list of necessary, not just services, but also the protections of kids that are in this age group. I think is important, not just the
Yeah.
services, but the protections. And
That's one of the areas that, again, I just didn't bring it up.
Okay,
but
good.
But it is something that I hope to have available for the committee tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, well, 8 o'clock on the dot. All right. There are a number of other issues that definitely people have with regard to the bill. I accept that. I know that we're going to talk about those as well. I appreciate the conversations that I've had related to the bill and that I've had with not just OPD and the state's attorneys, but also with the agency itself and many other people who have reached out and talked to me about these issues. Again, will this be the bill that solves all the problems? We haven't had one of those yet, so okay. But I think that it's an opportunity to do real good and to build confidence in the juvenile justice system as they begin to make real changes on programming and supports for some of the kids who break the law. So procedurally, the amendment office is there for you if you wish amendments to be drafted. Tomorrow we have 37 witnesses here in front of the committee, so it is a shorter day, which would lend more time for us to be able to work on something like this. So that's not saying we're going to go this late tomorrow night, but I'm just saying that we have this opportunity to work on the bill tomorrow because tomorrow is a little bit of in theory, I don't know, we could have 37 witnesses and everybody in here knows that we could go for about 10 hours. So it's possible. That's fine. We'll find out what happens next. But if people have amendments, again, asking them to be turned into the office electronically or by paper by 12 noon tomorrow, if you're a little behind that, that's fine. But we're going to start taking things up. My guess right now would be about 15 to 30 minutes after bill hearings tomorrow. That is subject to change depending on how many things are submitted. If I mentioned an issue that that your amendment is about, and I have received some already that are kind of in the ambit of what I've already discussed, I may be coming to you and saying, okay, do you still want to go forward with your amendment, even though it's something that I've already discussed? The goal will be to try and hone in on amendments where there is need for further discussion and also if my amendments address your issue, then it would make me happy not to hear more than I have to. Delegate Grammer.
I expect a vote on the bill itself tomorrow. Are we going to continue to work on it?
My hope is part of the reason for bringing it in tonight and part of the reason for having this work session tonight was to go through the bill and for me to address many of the issues that I saw and that I've heard of. With really no prejudice against issues that other people have raised. So if it's possible for us to, if we get to a place where people are comfortable voting on it on Thursday, then we will. Having said that, I would definitely expect that we will vote on it on Friday if we don't vote on it tomorrow.
Okay.
And again, you know, I feel like we have, you know, giving people plenty of time to bring in amendments and everything else, but that's kind of where we are. Delegate Moon, did you want to say something? Oh, do we have other bills in this committee? Let's see how, this is not meant to in any kind of nasty way. I want to see if we can get through this and if we can, we'll see where we are tomorrow. I also don't want to hold the committee incredibly late tomorrow night for no reason other than I don't want to hold the committee incredibly late tomorrow night. All right, with that, thank you all. Thank you all for watching at home. This has been the Judiciary Committee, and have a good evening.